In today's episode of HR Visionaries, we talk to Sara from SonderMind. Stay tuned. Welcome to HR Visionaries, where we unlock the secrets of modern HR. I'm Benjamin, your host. Join us as we shed light on today's HR universe with HR leaders and innovators from across the globe. Whether you're an HR pro, a business leader, or just curious about the future of work, this is your shortcut to the forefront of HR innovation. Brought to you by Hire, the AI talent attraction platform. Welcome to our new episode of HR Visionaries. I'm looking forward to today's guest, Sara. Sara, thanks a lot for taking the time.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Sara, could you give us a bit of a download? Who are you?
Happy to. In terms of my career, I am currently the VP of People at SonderMind, which is a mental health company based out of Denver. I live in Denver. I've been here for a little over a year, moving out here for this opportunity. Prior to SonderMind, I lived my entire life in New Jersey, working in Manhattan for my entire career, where in the first half of my career, I spent working for a number of large enterprise businesses, anywhere from 15,000 people to 100,000 people, working in-house in the legal department as a labor and employment paralegal, an HR advisor, and I was doing a lot of the back-end HR advisory work, dealing with writing policies and procedures, dealing with the not-so-fun side of HR, everything from lawsuits and garnishments and a lot of the compliance on the back end. My initial plan after college was to go to law school and be a lawyer, but at some point I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. And it was pretty much a natural progression for me to get into HR. I took my first opportunity as a head of people for a very small women's fitness company, retail company rather, that was opening operations in the US. They had a really big business established in the UK, but the US operation ran very independently. And that was my first venture into a solely HR role. From there, I learned how to not just run a business, but really deal with a lot of the operations of a company, setting up brick and mortar stores, dealing with e-commerce, wholesale, really anything and everything. And that was sort of my trajectory for the last 10 plus years into mostly the tech-enabled consumer startup space. I've been helping companies scale from a people lens, again, for about 10 years, and have joined companies at various employee headcount size, but mostly post-Series C fundraise, and have really helped them set up infrastructure or scale it to whatever the next ultimate goal was. So I've done everything from joining as the 5th corporate employee, scaling to a couple hundred, and then joining as a couple hundred, scaling to 1,000 and beyond. And now I'm at SonderMind, where we're growing in a more conservative pace for my lifestyle and my wants and desires, but still leading the people function and still at a company that really just aligns with what I believe from a mission-driven business.
Cool. Why did you decide to not go to law school, but to join the HR space?
Sure. If I'm really honest with myself, it's because I had just finished paying off my undergraduate student loans. I had a really hard time thinking about taking out another, call it $250,000 worth of student loans. I had a good job at the time. I was learning a lot. I really enjoyed what I was doing. I got so far as taking my LSAT, applying, getting in, and almost sending my deposit check. And then I can't tell you why. It was just sort of an instinct at the time, my early 20s, where I said, I don't know if this is really what I want to do. And so I was still working in legal departments at the time, but I was working for a massive retailer, Inditex, which people might know. They owned Zara.
Mhm.
And at the time, Zara had maybe 50 US stores. Today, they have hundreds and hundreds of stores. And internationally, I think they're one of the biggest retailers in the
Mhm.
world.
Wow.
Um, and our head of HR there was, she was a Spaniard. She was from Spain. She had worked for Inditex for a really long time. And she relied on me really heavily for guidance and thought partnership around US laws,
Mhm.
cultural differences, all of that stuff. And so it was this very pivotal moment where I wasn't as excited about law school, and it seemed that I was making this natural trajectory into HR. And so I kind of just followed my passion there, and one thing led to another. And I had the legal background, the compliance background, which I actually think helped me a lot more in my HR roles, understanding how to navigate pretty complex environments.
Mhm.
Um, Most of the companies I've worked for have been multi-state employers. They've had different populations of employees, whether it was retail or blue collar workers, or highly distributed populations to also just everyone in like the tech space,
Mhm.
very polarizing populations of employees. So I got really comfortable with understanding how to navigate the compliance side of things, which helped me be a better people leader, um, as I helped grow companies.
Well, growing companies is kind of a theme for you, right? So you, as you said, so growing from number five to several hundred, number 200 to 1,000. Um, why did you find this appealing in the first place, rather than like a corporate career, which is kind of settled normally?
To be honest, I think it's probably my personality and my nature and my natural instinct. I just have a natural desire, a natural action for, or a bias for action rather. Um, I think growing companies is fascinating. I
Mhm.
think one thing that is really great about what I'm doing, because I'm in the people space, I haven't necessarily pigeonholed myself to a certain industry. So I've worked in all different industries, from publishing to retail to real estate, and now behavioral health. And there's always a learning curve, of
Mhm.
course, when you go to a new industry, but my skill set is very transferable in that way. In terms of growing companies, I think one thing that I've constantly told people who ask me, how do you get a seat at the table, being in the HR space? How do you make sure that you're respected? How do you make sure that your CEO trusts you? I think for me, it's ultimately come down to I try to learn as much as I can about the business that I'm in.
Mhm.
I try to really understand, how do we make money? What are our pain points? What do the teams look like? What are the challenges that they're facing? And if I can intimately understand our business model and what works and what doesn't, it helps me have a different lens from a people perspective. And so I tend to think that every business decision is a people decision, and every strategic decision involves people. And so when I can have a really, really in-depth knowledge of the industry that I'm in or what we're doing, it just helps make better people decisions at the end of the day. Um, but again, I've been in healthcare, if you will, for the last, almost 2.5, 3 years. Healthcare is another beast. I
Mhm.
worked on the fertility side, and now I'm in the behavioral health side. There's a lot of compliance, there's a lot of regulatory, there's a lot of working with the payers and the insurance companies. And it gets a little more complex. And so I love solving problems. Learning new industries and new businesses is always really fascinating to me. And I think just keeps me motivated and keeps me inquisitive and asking questions. And so that's really why I love it.
Well, just mentioned that, well, you love what you're doing. It's well, always challenges and, well, seat at the table. Is that is it something that isn't that absolutely essential for a company that grows a lot? Given, well, how can you materialize growth mostly through people, right? So if people and HR don't have a seat at the table, how can you grow a great company then?
That is exactly right.
Mhm.
I think post-COVID, HR professionals have probably had more attention garnered towards them, given they tended to play a really big role in helping
Mhm.
companies navigate the complexities around COVID and what that meant for companies and businesses. Prior to that, I think depending on the industry, depending on the space, um, HR professionals were typically seen as a very administrative function,
Mhm.
probably your rule enforcers, if you will, in a lot of ways.
The
There's definitely been a
referees.
Yes, there's definitely been big movements and big pushes to rebrand HR into people.
Mhm.
And I think that's fully rooted in, wanting to have a more progressive,
Mhm.
proactive approach around people. For most businesses, the biggest line item in the P&L is probably your people cost, right?
Yeah.
Your headcount, your benefits, your expenses. And so to me, it seems crazy that it wouldn't be such a top
Mhm.
priority for CEOs or founders or companies, and it wouldn't make sense to not have this person have a seat at the table. But more often than not, that is not the case. And now, why that's not the case, there's probably a ton of reasons, ranging from just people's perspective. There's different focus areas that people want to focus on, but I think when you bring a people person in as early as you can, and you can start to structure not only the business, the policy, the people, the systems the right way from the beginning, you'll have a better time scaling your business and not necessarily have to worry about some of the things that become more complicated
Mhm.
as you get to, call it, 50, 60, 70, 100 people and beyond. Um, I think, a lot of HR people is unfortunate to say, but burning out at record speeds.
Mhm.
Um, you are seeing a lot of HR people go and be consultants or do fractional HR roles or fractional head of people roles. And I think that's unfortunately pretty telling of the environments that they've been in where they haven't necessarily had a seat at the table.
Mhm.
And that's super unfortunate because there's such a need for what we're doing, and there's such a need for aligning business decisions around people decisions and vice versa. And so, I feel like I'm one of the lucky ones. I It gets hard for sure at times. I will not say this is an easy job. It can be emotionally draining at times as well. But I think keeping an anchor of like what you're rooted toward, whether it's the mission or the company or the people that you're working with or supporting, can really be incredibly beneficial. And just as much as I enjoy building businesses, it's really exciting and fascinating to see people grow as those businesses and those companies grow, whether they started one place like me on the legal side, thinking they were going to be a lawyer and doing something completely different, or doing something that they feel passionate about. It's just awesome to watch people grow as companies grow as well.
Well, you also mentioned that understanding business model is very important for you. Um, is this also a way how, in case you don't have a seat at the table, to elevate you basically to a position where you definitely have to have a seat at the table, give your, well, business critical well, you're definitely business critical, but some people might not understand, and and therefore, well, enabling you to speak their language then helps a lot to gain the seat at the table. That is, well, that should be reserved for people indeed.
Absolutely. I think I've been really lucky with some of the founders and CEOs that I've worked with. I think ultimately a lot of it's rooted in trust between this role and the founder and or CEO. Um, I've been fortunate that, a bunch of years back at one of the first startups I worked at, one of my CEOs said to me, I think it was on my first or second day of work, Sara, I need to be able to trust you 100%, and I need you to be able to trust me 100%. And whatever that looks like that is what this relationship is rooted in. And that, I think, spoke to me so much at the time. We were able to have really open and honest conversations, whether it was about people or the company or where we were going. But it also allowed an opportunity to be able, in a healthy and constructive way, to push back, to challenge, to criticize, and knowing that that relationship was deeply rooted in respect and transparency, I think just made our relationship that much stronger. And I very much have emulated that same mentality into the roles that I've taken since. I tend to be pretty transparent, even if it's the unpopular opinion at times. But I do think there is a lot of benefit to be able to have healthy conflict with your executive team or your CEO or others that you work with, because I think a lot of different perspectives are great to have, help you make more thoughtful decisions. And from my perspective, my viewpoint tends to have a people lens on it. And a lot of business leaders are thinking from a business lens or a monetary lens or something of that nature. And so when you incorporate the people lens, they might say, oh, I didn't think about that, or oh, that's a really good point. But at the end of the day, I think it's all rooted in relationships and trust and relationship building. And that is just so incredibly important.
How do you find those founders to work with that you can trust, that can place trust in you, and how do you select those people?
I will say for me, I think I've learned a lot over the years of working at different companies. Someone gave me really great advice a long time ago when I was sort of at a pivotal moment of one of the pivotal moments of my career. And they said to me, think about what your top 3 non-negotiables are. Doesn't matter what they are. It could be, I want to work for this industry, or I need to make this much money, or it has to be a remote role. It really doesn't matter. It's true to whoever the person is. I thought really hard about what those were for me. And I spent a lot of time thinking about them. And ultimately, the advice was, once you figure those out, don't stray. And if you don't stray from those 3 things as you're embarking on a job search, ultimately you will land somewhere that you feel good about. So my 3 have always kind of been the same. They've more or less changed ranking between 1 and 3, if you will, over time. But one of them has always been to work with a really smart and engaged executive team and CEO. And again, I think in my years of working in this space, it's meeting as many people as you can in the interview process, spending a lot of time. It's not just one conversation with the CEO, it's likely multiple conversations over multiple periods of time. It's also those informal conversations, having dinner or having coffee, where you can really understand, who is this person? What are they motivated by? What are their values and ethics? Do they align with mine? Do they truly care about this function? or do they want someone for the sake of having someone in this role? And so I've asked a lot of questions over the years of people I've reported to, dug really deep, and have made sure that I've spent a lot of time. And if there was a red flag, or if there was something came up that I didn't feel as good about, I would make sure I would go back and like really dig in and say, hey, can you explain this to me in a different way? Or can I get more context here? And I think ultimately I've had to listen to my instinct and my gut. And I tend to trust my instinct and my gut. I think it's helps me a lot from a people perspective. There isn't always a playbook in my world. There isn't always a right or wrong answer. There's usually a lot of gray, and you have to be really good with a lot of ambiguity. And so trusting your instinct from a people perspective and about people, I think is so important.
Um, did you think that instinct comes with experience?
Yes, I do. I think people probably have some innate instinct, but I think they learn to trust it more with experience. It's funny, I think back to a couple times in my career, one in particular when I was at a real estate startup. I had a meeting with an employee, and I said to my CEO, I can't tell you why, but I think this high performer is going to leave. And he's like, what are you talking about? They seem so happy, this and that. I don't know. I'm just picking up on these little signs, these subtleties, these things that came up in this conversation. And he was very concerned because this was a top performer. And I said, I'm sorry I don't have more data. I'm a data oriented person. So I like having data. I like looking at data. I like using data to make decisions, but sometimes I don't have a lot of data to make a decision. And I said, I'm just trusting my instinct here. He said, okay, I'm going to chat with this person tomorrow. He chatted with that person the next day, and he said, this person's fine. They're super happy. They're not going anywhere. I said, okay, I hope I'm wrong. And lo and behold, it was like a week and a half later, maybe it was a few weeks later, I don't remember, this person resigned. And it was incredibly shocking to our CEO. And I'll never forget, I had forgotten the conversation at the time, but he came up to me and he said, I didn't believe you when you told me because it was just based on your instinct, but I think you really need to listen to that instinct. And this was probably 2017 or 2018, so a bunch of years back. And the few times that I have gone against my instinct since then, I've been proven wrong. So I don't know if that works for everybody. Sometimes it's just a feeling, but it hasn't let me down yet. I'm hoping it won't, knock on wood. But again, I think I've picked up on cues and have refined my instinct more as I've gotten older and as I've, done this time and time again. So who knows?
Well, it's super fascinating. I'm of course wondering. So you said you moved from New Jersey to Denver for the most recent job you took. What did drive your decision when thinking about, well, should I leave should I leave the environment I'm so used to in New Jersey, the New York area, and go to Denver for a job?
Yeah, great question. I grew up in northern New Jersey, and where I grew up, it was a very natural progression to some people went away for school and some people didn't. I went to a local New Jersey university, and the natural progression was to go and get a job in Manhattan when you graduated. A lot of people did that. I found myself working in Manhattan in my early 20s. Been there through my mid 30s now, and You know, I have this very love-hate relationship with Manhattan. Can't describe it. I,
Well,
reflecting on it now,
I once queued 2 days in a row for 3 hours to get a cronut at Amazon's bakery.
New York does have the best food. I will say that, true and true. The best food. It's a very special place. Um, Working in Manhattan with this love-hate relationship, I commuted every day from New Jersey for, almost 15 years. And um, there's no place like it. I truly, truly believe that. I will say I didn't love it as much commuting to Manhattan when I was there, but there is this energy that Manhattan gives, and you get there and you feel like anything's possible. People want to work hard, they want to hustle, and I owe a lot of my work ethic, I think, to spending the majority of my career working in Manhattan. Um, at the time in mid 2022, I had decided to leave my last role. I had joined that company, a fertility startup. We were about 200 employees at the time. I had one person on my team. And when I left a year later, we were almost 1,000 employees, and I had something like 20 people on my team. And to be honest, I was completely burnt out. I was doing the scaling thing for a really long time. Um, I loved it, but I needed a break. Um, I took time off between jobs, not a lot of time off. I can say I got bored pretty quickly. But I started networking with a number of folks who I was connected through. I connected with a lot of the VCs who were looking for heads of people for their portfolio companies. And ultimately, I was connected to the folks at SonderMind. Um, and I wasn't initially planning on relocating. I was planning to be remote and just travel to Denver as much or as little as needed, work in New Jersey where I lived. And I had a lot of stuff going on in my personal life, and it just allowed me pretty last minute to make the change. My CFO had recently relocated from Seattle to Denver for SonderMind after working here for a couple of years. And she had said to me, not too long before I started, "Are you sure you don't want to come to Denver?" She knew what was going on in my personal life. And I said, "You know what? Why not? Um, what would that look like?" And so, in probably a month and a half, I packed up my life in New Jersey, drove out to Denver, found a place to live, and started a new job out here. Denver's such a breath of fresh air. It's really amazing. There's a true work-life balance. The people are great. There's a lot of startup companies here. There's a lot of really established companies here. And I have to say the weather is perfect. People believe that Denver gets a lot of snow. The mountains, of course, do, but Denver is mild. It's like 300 days of sun a year. Today it's 66 degrees out. It's December 4th or 5th, whatever it is. So I really can't complain. I will say I've been back to the East Coast often since I've moved here. I've been back to Manhattan a couple of times since I've been here. Um, I never thought I would miss it leaving it, but I do. I truly do. I miss the food, I miss the livelihood, I miss that anything and everything can happen at any given moment of the day. But it's really nice being able to go back and spend time and see friends and former colleagues and take meetings in New York City. And so I I had a great part of my career in Manhattan, and I'm having the next great part of my career here in Denver.
Um, I do have a question regarding what you just said to, well, being burned out, listen to yourself, because like this Manhattan energy, I would say, I also find that um, so so remarkable. And give me 1 second. Okay, yes, it's a bit annoying. Great. Sarah, let me ask one question regarding the New York energy and also being burned out. So there's one personal story. One of the weirdest or most remarkable situations I've ever encountered was being in New York City, in downtown New York, during a blizzard when no one was on the street. And so you have New York when in a picture New York, it's super busy, it's super crowded, everyone is in a hurry. But back then, I think it was early 2016 or so, it was like a massive blizzard. Everyone was kind of evacuated from the city, and you were just walking alone on Broadway, no cars, nobody. So there's something that I will never forget, how a city can calm down that is like normally super stressful. So you just mentioned, okay, well, you were burned out and you didn't feel like, okay, I can continue. Having in mind, so the New York, how it is, and then, well, being in the position where you have to decide, okay, well, I continue and I'm gonna hurt myself, or I'm gonna change something. That's a very brave decision, right? Because we as human beings normally have the we normally force ourselves to carry on and to hurt ourselves. So how did you approach the situation back then? How did you make the decision to, well, stop something that may hurt you going forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. The short answer is a lot of self-reflection. The longer answer is, most of my career, I never thought I was burnt out. I think it's just you went through the motions. You were in Manhattan 5 days a week and all of that. And then COVID happened, and I was solely responsible for leading a lot of the efforts at my company at the time. We had essential employees. We were in the real estate space. We had people servicing apartment buildings, and how bad it was. We had people all over the country who are impacted in different ways. And I think honestly, that time caused me a lot of self-reflection, a lot of anxiety, a lot of all those other things. But I was actually able to slow down, I think, and recognize what's important, what do I want to do. And I initially joined that company when we were really small. We were 65 employees. Our mission was to make city living more affordable and convenient for renters in urban areas. We were focused on the co-living sector. It was around the time when WeWork was really big, driving into the co-working sector, and there was a lot of momentum in the space. About 4 years later, we more or less had transitioned into a tech-enabled property management company. It didn't really align with my ethos anymore in, mission-driven companies. And so I took the leap of faith to go to a women's fertility company that very much aligned with a lot of beliefs I had around unlocking the barrier of access to care, having women know what their options are, being educated about struggles with infertility and stuff like that. That was the company that I scaled up to almost 1,000 in a year. And at some point in 2021, I said, I'm really tired. I'm just not feeling like I can give my best self to work. And so I took a solo trip. I went to a wellness resort in Arizona over Thanksgiving. I said to my family, hey, this is really the only time off I can have right now. I'm taking a week. I'm going on vacation. I'm sorry I won't be making Thanksgiving this year, but I just need to disconnect. I went to this wellness resort. I turned off my cell phone for a full 7 days. I read maybe 7 books. I did a lot of workshops. I did journaling and a lot of meditation and a lot of things that I probably wouldn't normally do. a little before that, actually in March of 2020, I started getting into meditating. I used the Calm app and I was doing it almost every day. And so I think I was a little more in tune with myself. I could totally see the differences in the days where I meditated versus when I didn't. And on that trip in 2021, with a lot of journaling, I had a lot of eye-opening cathartic moments, if you will, both on my personal life side and my work side. And I came back to work and I saw my CEO the next day and she said, "You just look so much lighter. You look so refreshed. Tell me how it was." And I told her, and that was in November. I ended up staying at that company for, till that next summer. Um, but in that time, I was working from home more. I was still commuting into Manhattan. I love being in person. I love being around people. But I think I was really just focused on my mental health.
Mhm.
I was focused on doing things that filled my cup, whether that was spending time with friends or working out or whatever it might be. Um, and, I, after probably call it a year and a half, 2 years, I really realized I need to slow down. It took me a long time. There
Mhm.
wasn't necessarily one pivotal moment. It was probably a series of things. But I think having at this point almost been meditating for 2 years pretty consistently, reading a lot more, um, spending my time in different ways really was eye-opening. And I still want to work hard. I still want to build companies. I still want to hustle. But I think it's about setting healthy boundaries. And I didn't have healthy boundaries when I was working in New York. And that could be self-inflicted. That could be because you're around everyone who's constantly hustling and working and always doing more and taking on more and working harder and working later. It could be that. It's probably a combination of both. But I think, at the end of the day, each person is different in what they want to do, what they like to do, what fills their cup versus what doesn't. And so for me, it was just really about reflecting, slowing down a bit. I still work hard. I still work a lot. I work smarter for sure. And I really, really, really value and focus my free time away from work. And I think that's one of the amazing things about SonderMind. Because we're a mental health company, there are a lot of mental health companies out there. And I was a little skeptical about getting into the mental health space, given there's a lot of saturation in the market and there's a lot of companies who don't practice what they preach, which is unfortunate. But SonderMind truly, puts people first. We really believe in the importance of filling your own bucket before you fill others. We have a value called bucket worthiness. You have to keep your bucket full. It's important to everybody at every level of the business to spend quality time with family and whatever is important to you. And I think our CEO, our executive team does a good job in balancing work and family needs, whatever that looks like. And I think people see that and they respect that and they understand that. And it truly is a company that does believe in the value of mental health and putting yourself first and making sure that you can bring your best self to work, because the only way you can do that is if you're in a healthy state, to be honest.
Awesome. Sarah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for elaborating. I really, really enjoyed our conversation. Great, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. This is wonderful. Thanks for having me. And yeah, let me know if there's anything I can do to be helpful in the future.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, guys, for listening. And I think it was very cool. So Sarah elaborated on, well, how to take care of yourself. Very important topic, I guess. And well, I think you should also try the SonderMind app
Yes.
then, I guess, right?
Yes, we do it all different ways. You can go on the website. We have an app. We take insurance. There's a lot of opportunities to get mental health care, and I've done it throughout my entire adulthood in different ways, and people have different viewpoints on it, but you know, they can always help whatever you're going through.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
and
Benjamin.
see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.